Good afternoon, everyone. I've had about three power failures here. So if you start to see me move my mouth and nothing happens, then you'll know we've temporarily disconnected. But you got to be agile. You got to deal with it. So I'm curious, has anybody been to a meeting recently? Raise your hand. Did you enjoy it? Was it fun? Most people tell me no, that going to meetings is somewhat like root canal. The only issue with root canal is when you get it fixed, the pain goes away. But these constant meetings where nothing gets done, we have a full agenda, we talk about deliverables, and then next week come back and the same thing. And so I hear that all the time when I talk to leaders. In fact, I was talking to a client one day recently, and they were in the middle of a workday implementation, and they'd spent $6 million in 2018 and six million, I thought million, $6 million in 2019, and they didn't really couldn't use it. And they asked me to sit in and figure out why. So I was sitting there and I was observing, and it was pretty obvious to me that these meetings were a total waste of time. The same things came up week after week, not resolved. People were pointing fingers at each other, blaming each other for the challenges. And no wonder why this senior HR leader was kind of pulling her hair out because nothing gets done. So when I meet people for the first time, they ask me what I do, and I say Agile HR leadership, and say, "What's that?" And I talk about this meetings, and I say to them that Agile is a way to take these meetings and make them productive. Agile is a way to take the way you plan, the way you use time, the way you do projects, and make you more efficient. That's really what it's about. Been focused on this for many years. Been brainstorming, talking to people, and it really works. I'm going to demonstrate to you. But one thing that people typically get confused, they think that Agile HR is IT. Absolutely not. I mean, a piece of it is, but please don't get overwhelmed with thinking that you got to be an IT professional. It's not. We're just going to take some basic principles that are used in IT and apply them to HR. So this is not your CIO's agile focus anymore. It's your own. And so we're going to talk about that. We live in very interesting times. I'm not sure everybody could have predicted this. I mean, people are very isolated. People are angry. If you looked at my Facebook feed, you would see people angry and happy and mad at the same time in the same sentence. It's kind of overwhelming, and have to try to avoid not getting sucked into it. It's something we haven't really anticipated before, and we're having a hard time dealing with it. But in any crisis, we want to make sure we at least learn from it. So we're kind of looking at our rear view mirror. We're going forward, trying to deal with it. At the same time, we're looking what we did and what we could do better. It's not a blame game. It's really taking what's happening now and looking in the future. I mean, it's weird times. The best part of the day is when you go to supermarket and you get one of these and you find on the shelves, or you're waiting in the mail and it's a week late, but you finally get one of these. Okay, so it's just a strange time, but we don't want to lose sight of the fact that we have to plan for the future and we have to learn from this because there's going to be more coming. There's going to be disruptions. It's not hopefully not the severe, God willing, but there's going to be things coming. So so why agile? Why agile HR leadership? Well, um, we know there's going to be problems, but the only thing we can do, we can't avoid the problems. We can just respond to them more effectively. That's the goal here: is how do we perhaps anticipate, but if we can, how do we respond in a more effective way? And that's because if we can become more agile, we can do it that way. So 9 years ago, I took a slight diversion. I've been in HR most of my career. I wound up working for IBM as a Scrum Master, which is a project leader in the IT space. And I actually was building code in Philadelphia area and India and China, places like that. And we were just starting it up. And after a couple of months, I realized, Agile does one thing I hadn't really seen before. It actually works. It actually takes projects that typically would go on and on and on and never be successful and made them more successful by using some basic principles. We're going to talk today. We're going to talk about the same principles that can be helpful to you in your situation. So we started, as I've been evangelizing this, I started teaching at universities, and I met a friend of mine, Steve Hart, who was the at the time the senior vice president of leadership, learning and development, leadership development, the Federal Reserve Bank. Phenomenal guy. And as we're putting this course together, which is going extremely well, we realized that it's agile is a new way of thinking and working that requires an element of leadership to make it work. It doesn't work without the other. You can't just focus on the practices and the processes without leadership. How do you get people engaged? How do you create shared leadership? And we'll talk about that. So the goal here is not that we can avoid mistakes, is how can we respond to them more effectively by being more agile and responsive. And the rest of the time, we're going to talk about that. So here are 8 things we've observed over the last 3 years of doing this. Now, they seem like pie in the sky, but it's proven that it works. And it's not that we need to do a lot of things differently. It's like Einstein said, what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. Well, we're going to do things differently and expect different results. And we've seen this over the last 3 years, and I won't go through all of them, but you get better communications, you get better sustainable improvements, better morale, and what's more important nowadays than getting better morale and having people feel they're a part of something? And so by implementing some of these agile principles, you can really make a difference. So, okay, now, so when I left IBM, I took a couple CHRO roles, and the last one left in 2017, and really thought about how can we bring this knowledge forward, because Agile HR leadership can be confusing. It can be a little bit intimidating to people. And as Steve always says, all transformation is linguistic. We need to use the right language to be able to transform ourselves and people. And so one day I was listening to the radio, to the news on TV, watching, and I saw Ginny Rometty, who used to be the CEO at IBM when I was there, and she was talking about EBITDA, and it kind of the light bulb went off. EBITDA, for those of you that may know it, is a measure of financial health of an organization. Earnings before income taxes, depreciation, amortization. And I said, wow, let's do that for agile health of the organization. And we came up with these 7 principles: experimentation, breaking things down into small pieces, incremental iterative improvements, time-based work, teams, developing servant leadership, and communicating with customers. Now, we won't have time to talk about all these. We're going to blend a few. Primarily, we're going to talk about breaking down big things, which if you get nothing else from this conversation is that you need to really break big things into small pieces and then incrementally, iteratively fix them until they scale. That's really what the goal here is. Okay, so if you look on the left, you see this big boulder, and this person is trying to move it up the hill. Well, he's not going to really be successful for a variety of reasons, but I'd be afraid actually if he moved it and it kind of went the other way and rolled him over. So how do we get this up the hill? We basically break it down into small pieces and start laying the foundation. So basically we put the first row of rocks, then the second row of rocks, and then the third row of rocks until we got to the top. So we broke it down into small pieces and we incrementally improved it. This is the essence of Agile. Again, if you take nothing else from this conversation, it's take a big thing, do small pieces, and incrementally improve it. The good thing about this, if I get my annotation here to work, let's see here now. Let's say we just stopped right here. If we only built the wall to here, right? And we got called away. So this is typical in an organization, right? You'll have a project that's going on. You have a leader, and all of a sudden, God forbid, they get hit by a bus or they get moved, the priorities change, and you go back to square one. The beauty of Agile is anything that's highlighted will stay. The wall won't be as high, but it'll still be there. It's like working on a puzzle. You do a certain amount of pieces, and then you walk away and come back. You don't have to start over again. So the beauty of Agile is you have sustained improvements that people see and can recognize. It's a little easier way to manage things. Okay, now, let me just kind of get rid of that. All right. Okay. So the first thing I want to talk about is how we meet meetings. Now, typically people meet for a variety of reasons. They want to share information, but if I'm a leader, I typically want to make sure people are aligned and people are accountable. And that's great. But, I've seen time and time again, as I mentioned before, these meetings don't really do that. They're just typically a waste of time. You get people on the left there who are bored. Actually, this picture, they're working from their homes, but imagine people working from homes, not sharing their screen. They're probably doing something else. And so this is not the most effective way. But the biggest reason it doesn't work is it doesn't solve problems quickly enough. And so, as I mentioned before, we're always going to have problems. It's not that there's not going to be any problems. It's what you do with them and how you respond. So let's look at a typical example. Monday morning, you have a staff meeting, right? Everybody comes in, you do a report, go over the minutes, and then you give people assignments. Okay, one of those is HR business part. After the meeting, the next day, the HR business department attempts to do his work, but runs into a problem. Can't get it done. So, being an independent person, and we're told to bring solutions, not problems, he tries to fix the problem over the next Wednesday and Thursday and Friday and the weekend. Come back Monday, problem's not fixed. We don't even know what the problem is. So we wasted a whole week trying to identify the problem. And then once we maybe come up with a solution on that Monday meeting, we spent the next week working on it. So we spent 2 weeks identifying a problem and coming up with a solution. Let's look how Agile does that differently. Agile believes in meeting less but talking more. So instead of those hour or 2 hour weekly meetings, we meet every day for 10 to 15 minutes. That's all, 10 to 15 minutes. We ask 3 questions. What did you do yesterday? What are you going to do today? And what problems do you have? So take this HR business partner who was out there having a problem the first day. The second day, he would mention I have a problem. And other people around would hear that and try to come up with a solution. So if they came up with a solution, he might be able to work on it Wednesday. Or let's say that solution didn't work. You could come up with another solution on Thursday. So you see what my point here is that we need to identify problems much more quickly, let alone the solutions. And so Agile, because it meets more frequently, allows you to have better conversations that are more frequent, not as long, where you ask those 3 questions. We're not talking about the weather, how your sports team did, or nowadays, we're not talking about that anyway, but it really keeps the conversation to 10, 15 minutes. And it's hard for people not to show up, but imagine if you could do that. Imagine if you had meetings that were productive and you actually got things done. How would your life be? Would you be able to take these long projects, don't go anywhere, and make them more successful? I think so. So that's the first step, is breaking down how we meet. I know you, like me, you spent weeks working on a presentation, 25 slide presentation to your CHRO, and you looked at all the angles, and it's a masterpiece. It had all these bells and whistles, it had annotations, it had slides. It was great. So you give it to the person, and they scan. All right, let me look at it. I'll get back to you. You don't hear anything. A week later, oh, by the way, what'd you think of that? I haven't got to it. I'll get back to you. Another week later, yeah, I saw some good points, but I need to dig into it a little more deeply. You really think the person looked at it in detail? Probably not. Imagine you and that day you gave that person your 30 slide deck. How many other people gave that person a 30 slide deck the same day? More than 1, 2, 3, everybody? And so you're immediately assuming that the leader who you're giving this elaborate information to is going to understand and embrace it. It's like what we say here in the saying, and I got this from Sean Ramesh, who's a great, phenomenal leader at Comcast. This is kind of paraphrasing a quote. I'm overwhelmed, and people spend time consuming things that I have no time to read. People skim things nowadays, even PowerPoint presentation. So how do you get around this? Let's look at the 2 icons. One's a resume, and one's a 1-page document. What's the difference between these 2? Not much, right? If you look at a resume is 1 or 2 pages. It's very concise. It presents a message. It's easy to skim, and it tells a person what you want them to know, right? 1-pager should be the same thing. It should be 1 or 2 things that people can skim and focuses on things that are important to you, okay? People don't need lots and lots of documentation. They need information. They need to be able to communicate. So Agile, again, breaks those big communications decks and time into small pieces. There are certain artifacts and rituals we do in Agile to kind of facilitate this. But if you do nothing else, take those big documents and break them down to small pieces. And lastly, all executives I've ever worked with, they listen to a radio station called WIIFM. What's in it for me? Okay, it's not what you have, it's what they need, what they hear. And so when you present this document, make sure you're presenting in a way that helps them and also helps you. Okay, let's look at time. When I worked at AstraZeneca, we were working on a applicant tracking system, had all the bells and whistles. We spent 6 months working on it and nothing ever happened. Why? Well, a month in, people were really excited. They offered lunch. And so people came for the lunch, then left, tuned out. And fewer and fewer people came. So the changes they made were based on fewer input, smaller input. And no one saw the progress. No one knew what was going on. And finally, the project was killed. Why? Because it just took too long. I call Tarken's law there, that there's an inverse relationship between time and satisfaction. Imagine you came up with a plan on February 1st, 2020. Be obsolete a month later. So we don't have that time. You need to demonstrate results. So how does Agile do that? Well, Agile has something called a sprint. It's a 2 to 3 week block of time where we do a piece of work. So if you think about that wall we just did, in the first sprint, 2 to 3 weeks, we would build the first layer. We'd finish it and say, we've done the first layer. What do you think? Okay. Then the next sprint, we do the second level. And then the third sprint, we do the third sprint, the third level. And you can see how that goes. It may take us 6 iterations to get there, but after each sprint, we show progress. We show results. We feel good about ourselves because we've done something versus not doing anything in 6 months and having something that fails. So that's the power of Agile, is to break your time into small pieces where you can demonstrate successes. It helps you get sustained buy-in from leaders. It also helps you maintain your energy and passion when you see things are happening. Plus, you see where you're going. If we get to the 6th level, the wall will be done. And nowadays, it's important because you don't know where you're going to be. And so that provides a sense of direction that's helpful. All right, so these first 3 things you can do today, we talked about how you meet, breaking down meetings, breaking down communications, and how you manage time. Let's talk about more strategic things in terms of leadership. If you look on the left, when Com sees, I guess maybe last year in December, November, you're captaining a ship, things are going well, and everybody's in a role, and the captain is maybe at the bridge, maybe not. But then we have the COVID-19, and all hell breaks loose, and we're all hands on deck. We're not sure which way we're going, which not sure the wind's going to stop blowing, it's going to change direction. But in those times, we kind of look to our leaders to rescue us, to help us. But what do you do when your captain doesn't know or doesn't understand? And yet we depend on leaders to come up with the answers. And can one person really know what's going on? No. We're depending on one person for the answers when we need to have many. And so Steve and I, we thought about this a lot, and we decided that we need to move from a hierarchical view of leadership to a shared leadership. So on the left in the screen, you'll see a typical project manager lead. You have a boss and you have direct reports, hierarchical. Okay. Then if we look on the right, we have what we call self-organized team and a servant leader. Those were 2 of the principles we talked about. So we've kind of combined them into shared leadership to say that leadership is shared by all people. The role of the leader, the manager, is to facilitate the team doing their work and provide support as it goes along. In Agile teams, you will see that. There's a project leader, but their role is simply to facilitate the team doing the work themselves. And that's the power of that. Because instead of one person being in charge, you have multiple people with multiple inputs doing different things. Okay. Last kind of strategic thing is, we've entered the new age of experimentation. We've taken everybody in an office and threw them on to their homes on Zoom like we're now. Okay. The problem is we don't have the systems to do that. We don't have the culture. All our systems and culture was based on working at home, on the job, face to face. Now we're virtual. aside from the fact that we feel lonely and isolating, a lot of our systems haven't really come in to do that. And so, but we're doing what I always do. It's called ready, fire, aim. And that's the beauty of Agile is not a lot of planning. You just act and fix it. So in many ways, all of you out there have acted very in an Agile way. The problem is, how do you sustain that? How do you benefit from that? How do you learn from that? And so in order to create an experimentation, you have to do a couple of things. You have to create a safe place where people feel comfortable engaging and talking. And, you've heard about that from your own perspectives. You've heard, psychological safety. You have to have what we call cognitive diversity, not just demographics, but the way people think differently. Typically, we put a team together for certain criteria, certain business demands. That's gone now. All right. You have to reformulate your teams and formulate your talents for in a way that's going to help you now, because the requirements are different. You have people working from home who probably never can work from home, or people who love it, who before you thought were a pain in the butt because they wanted to work from home. So now you really have to think about cognitive diversity. You have to look for those hidden assets. I'll tell you, client, what we've had some group exercises with our class, and we have one of the corporate leaders, large HR human capital technology firm. She was struggling to get a customer, and she found out that this customer was a yogi. He liked yoga. Well, lo and behold, she finds out on her team there's 3 or 4 people who are practicing yogis. I forget what term is. Apologize. They do yoga a lot, and so that connection was helpful to her in getting that client. So the key for you is, what hidden talents, what do your people have that you can tap into? Okay. So again, we've talked about 3 tactics you could do tomorrow and 2 longer term strategy. I've just kind of put this chart together in a just breakdown. I'm not, it just kind of shows you the 4 tactical areas and the 2 shared areas. And again, breaking down work is the key. We want to take big things, whether it's meetings, whether it's communications, whether it's time, whether it's planning, whatever it is. The goal here is to break a big thing down into small pieces and then incrementally, iteratively build it to scale. And you can see the benefits in breaking down work. People get a handle on projects, deliverables. They're not overwhelmed. They can see success. Success is obvious as they build things. Just sustain momentum and energy. And that's what we're lacking nowadays today is, we need that energy. People we don't see, if we were involved in the project and they could see demonstrated results, they would more likely be interested. Again, shared leadership are longer term things, but we need to focus on how leaders and their teams can work together to create more capacity. Last slide, three takeaways on an offering. Agile HR is not IT, but key practices adopted and modified. Again, it's if you're concerned, I don't know IT, it's not IT. It's simply breaking things down. And if you do a puzzle at home, you can do Agile. It's a new way of thinking, which needs element of leadership. Again, if anybody's just telling you got to start doing scrums and sprints, tell them, stop a second. We need to talk about the leadership aspect of that, because if we don't have shared leadership, it's not going to work. And the key is, how do you break meetings and projects and work into smaller components for incremental iterative improvements? Lastly, we've been doing this for a while. We developed an Agile readiness tool, free, no obligation, charge. We found this is helpful to organizations to kind of figure out where they are, what they need to do to become more agile, start the journey.